As many of you probably know, I love trying out vintage crafting toys, and the one that I'm trying out today is probably the largest one yet with my most ambitious project yet. Look at this monster. Oh my gosh, hold on. Now I think you can see all of it. This is the Easy Weaver, and thank you so much to my YouTube members and patrons who have voted on me trying out this vintage toy. Why don't we open this box and see what we have inside, and I will tell you about what my ambitious idea is this time. And thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video. Everything looks a little mouse eaten. There's definitely mouse droppings in there. I can see a little bit of weaving on the loom. Do you see that? This loom, so it's by Marks. I found a commercial, and the commercial to me seems very, very 60s. It's so fun. The jingle is so cute.
A lovely little hat, I made it by myself. A colorful placemat, I made it by myself. A purse for mom, a scarf for dad, even a pocketbook. How do you make them? Just look.
With Easy Weaver, the real hand loom by Marks.
Isn't that fun? So before we continue, I'm gonna be right back. I'm a little grossed out, I won't lie. I'm gonna go wipe everything down. All right, we are back on a new day because everything actually required a pretty significant cleaning, but I'm so excited to use the loom. Let us see what the instructions say. It has a start with a warping. So the frame is on pivot pins number 2. There's like numbers down here. Now, one of the things that I will say is that I noticed that the piece of work that was on this loom that I took off is what is called weft-faced. I've never woven anything that's weft-faced. I think the only thing that I know that is weft-faced that I've seen, I'm sure there's lots, but the one thing that I know is like a Swedish type, am I gonna try to pronounce it? Krokbragd.
Krokbragd.
I'm sorry for butchering it, but it's a style of Swedish weaving, and I think it looks amazing. And what weft-faced means is that you basically don't see the warp threads at all when the piece is finished. You only see the weft. That's the only thing that's facing you is the weft. When something is balanced, you see both the warp and the weft crossing over each other. This is the first time where I would like to create something on a vintage toy that I can use every day. And what is that thing? That is an apron. Here are the yarns I'm planning on using. Just to get a sense, I'm just going to do like a little bit of a sample here. And then, I feel like it's too loosey-goosey. So when you have a loom and you are setting up to create a fabric, what happens is that for the yarn that you have, you look at what is called the EPI. EPI stands for ends per inch. It gives you an idea of how many yarns you want next to each other to create a certain density of fabric. For this particular yarn, the EPI is 24. So I want 24 ends per inch. My openings here are at 4. So to hit 24, I would need 6 of these per inch to technically hit around 24. But I looked at it, and because of the way that they're spread, I don't think that it would fill in those gaps really nicely if I were to do the balanced weave rather than the weft-faced weave. And so I'm just gonna kind of work with what this yarn is telling me to do, and I'm going to do my first ever weft-faced weave on a toy loom. Because why not? So I'm looking back right now watching myself working on a toy 1960s weaving loom, and it is fascinating because I'm actually currently traveling right now for a weaving workshop where I get to work on looms that are over 300 years old. But like I said, I'm traveling, and traveling and internet use come with their own risks, so I want to thank the sponsor for today's video, Surfshark, for keeping my personal data and browsing information safe at all times, but especially when I'm away from home. So Surfshark VPN works by encrypting all the data that is sent between your device device and the internet, keeping it protected from anyone who might be listening in. I feel like it's important at all times, but especially when I'm traveling and I'm using these really big public unsecured networks like at the airport. Another big bonus for me is that I'm doing a lot of textile history research as part of the workshop that I'm taking, but so much of it is region locked, which means that I can't access it from the US. And this is another place where Surfshark comes in, as a VPN switches your device's real location with another one, so you can virtually put yourself anywhere in the globe, which is great for my own personal textile research. I also really love it for watching some of my comfort shows, which have now been regionally locked. If this is something that interests you, then go to surfshark.com/eknits or use code eknits at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Thank you again so much to Surfshark for making today's content possible. And let's go back to my 1960s toy loom because I'm pretty sure that I finished warping it by now. Our loom is warped. How cool is that? I think it's awesome. You have basically what is the reed. You have your beater bar right here. You have your, look at that, I'm creating my shed. I think the next step is to load up our shuttles with some colors. I have filled all of my shuttles. Look, these are the shuttles that we filled. I will admit, I am not at all looking at the instructions anymore. I'm kind of intuiting what we should be doing here, but I don't know if that's being risky with this at all, but this is so cool. This whole setup is the coolest thing. Starting to pull in slightly on my selvages, so I have to watch out a little bit. But yeah, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and chug along. I'll check in case I have any issues, but I'll put you on a little bit of a time lapse so you can see my progress. So you might have been watching that lovely time lapse and at the very end wondering to yourself, why did you squish all of that in and down and together like that? And the reality is that as I was weaving one of the picks, I don't know if it'll come across in the stop motion in my time lapse. It's not stop motion, it's time lapse. But my nail caught on one of the threads that I was weaving. It's not going to be a useful item for me. If my nail catches and drags, I'm just not going to wear that apron, and I actually want to use what I'm making. So I squished it all together, and that is so much sturdier. Nothing is catching. It's a very, very dense woven fabric. What it is that I can make out of this. The first thing that comes to mind with something of this size is like a placemat. So I might make myself a placemat. Although it's literally just a square. And I know that's kind of boring, and I'm sorry about that. I wish it were something more interesting, but I don't want to make something that's visually interesting and then not something that I'm going to use. I want to use what I make today. I'm sorry. I wish. I really wanted to make an apron. If I had knitting yarn that were thicker and in cotton, it could potentially work on this. Fortunately, I don't. So I'm working with what I have. We are about this far along. We are, I think, 11 inches in, and now I'm going to start the matching stripes on the other end. In total, it'll be about 10 inches by 14 inches, which isn't a very large placemat, but my desk, space for me to put my plate down for lunch isn't that huge, so I don't actually want such a big placemat, so that'll be perfect for me. I think I've finished weaving. The proportions are a little off from the right to the left, and I think I realize it's because you cannot wind this warp as you're weaving. I'm used to winding the warp so that I'm always working in kind of like the front few most inches, and instead I have to wind and work this way. And so what I was looking at here versus what I was looking at there had a different perspective, and my perspective was off. And so I wove this at a different slight perspective. Should I have been measuring it? Yes, I did think I was measuring it, but I think I relied more on my perspective than I thought I was. To take it off. On this end, there are loops that are formed by this warp right here. And if I pull on the warp threads on the other side, just that they should close. Oh, there you go. You see how they're disappearing kind of? So that should lock that weft into place. Now I want to do that across the entire piece. So I'm gonna try and see if I can do what I was just saying, where I lock the weft into place, but I do it on both ends. The instructions said if I just pull here, it'll lock all of these into place, and then I tie and cut and weave all this in. But maybe I can do what I was saying. So if I pull this one, what I'm hoping is that this one will move and lock into place. So let's see what happens. Ooh, it's locking. And this one moves into place. Half is done with that technique. Was it quick? No, that took me over 20 minutes. The edges are nice and wonky and not at all even. So the results aren't as nice as I'd hoped. So I don't know. I don't know that this is worth the effort. Once I started it, I might as well do the other side similarly. So why don't I go ahead and finish off the other side? I will give it a nice little wash press. All I'm gonna do is cut these off. And then I will show you the placemat when it's done. And after all that, I washed it, I pressed it, I shrunk it. There's no way that this can be a placemat. This is like less than 8 by 10 inches. So I was thinking, I think I will use it as a pot holder. I started off incredibly ambitious, wanting to make an apron. Yeah, that would not be anywhere close to wide enough to make an apron. Then I went from an apron and I said, okay, maybe not an apron because it's gonna take me way too long to make an apron, maybe a placemat. I thought I would get a placemat, shrunk it in the wash, and now we have a pot holder. So am I disappointed from my original goals? I mean, yeah. I would have really liked to have another apron. Again, I already have like 500 million aprons, but I will never say no to another apron, so I would have liked to have another one. And overall, that toy loom is A+. I feel like weaving has such a high hurdle for entry. Like the entry level for weaving is so high. For knitting, it's yarn and some knitting needles. For crocheting, it's just a crochet hook and some yarn. The cost can be quite low to get started for both of those. For weaving, you have to find some sort of local class or a friend of a friend who will let you use their loom if they happen to have it, or some extra time to learn it. There's so much to learn, there's so much terminology, and if you maybe want to think about getting a loom is so expensive. But again, I don't really know what I'm talking about. I just find it fun. I have a lot of fun with these kids' toys. I think they're a great time. I am very pleased with this. Will I use the loom again? I barely find enough time to use my full-size floor looms. I'm currently in the process of putting a warp on that, so I'm probably going to prioritize my time on my full-size looms because I love them so much, but I think I'm going to save it for the future because I think it is fantastic and I very much want to make more use of it. And thank you again to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video. Remember to go to surfshark.com/eknits to have 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Thank you so much for joining me. If you enjoyed watching me kind of struggle, kind of enjoy working with this toy, please feel free to check out the rest of the playlist right here, and hopefully I'll see you either there or next time. Bye!